Hi again guys, and welcome to episode 24 of Weekend Warriors, the review series for GranTurismo's sports car lineup, which is a pretty broad category. There are a fair few more sports cars on GranTurismo than there are super sports cars, and definitely far more than there are supercars. Now, within the sports car category, it's a very varied one. You've got larger coupes, smaller open-top two-door two-seaters, and some which are more luxury-based. This particular model is one of the more mainstream sports cars, one of the more attainable vehicles. Used values on these, in Europe at least, aren't very high currently. You can buy them pretty cheap, obviously depending on the spec of the model, but overall it's a car which is much more attainable than something like a Tesla Roadster or a Cobra or a TVR for most people. This is a vehicle with sports in mind, but on a budget, and the car is the Peugeot 206cc, or convertible coupe. It's a folding hardtop, and it's technically a 2+2, but not really. The back seats are very small. Obviously on the game that doesn't really matter at all, and so the question arises, why are we reviewing it? Because of course we don't review every car on GranTurismo. I only include within each series basically the most notable vehicles. There are a couple of cars in this series and that series that aren't featured. Not because they're necessarily awful, but because maybe they're just more versions of the same car which are essentially the same. Maybe they're just vehicles which don't really deserve to be in a series, something like a ho-hum hatchback or a mainstream sedan that doesn't really have much potential. So why is this car here? Well, the reason why is because, like some other vehicles such as the Megane that we reviewed on Monday, and also some others like the 307 and also the 307cc, this is a sleeper. It's a vehicle which is very easy to underestimate, to look at but not even see. You can pass over it in the dealership very easily without even noticing the car, and you pretty much never see anyone use this vehicle. I'm sure it has fans, but in general it's just not a highly used vehicle as far as GranTurismo goes. So what do you get? Well, first there's the price. 26 grand is very cheap for a sports car, and obviously this is a convertible version of a hatchback, so it's not a pure sports car, but it's still a sports convertible at least. The engine on this model is a decent size. It is a 2 litre, which isn't bad for a relatively small car. It would be easy to have fitted it with, say, a 1.6 or a 1.8, but they didn't. They fitted it with a 2 litre, and that's good, because the potential of that engine, especially as far as torque, could be better than were it a smaller engine. Now, when it's fully tuned, this car really does put out some good numbers. Now, it's not going to worry a supercar anytime soon, but 341 horsepower, 275 foot-pounds of torque, and, most impressively, 996 kilos, is a pretty good spec, especially for a vehicle that you can have right in front of you and not even see it. That is the definition of a sleeper car. And if you can have a sports car, something that's even an open-top vehicle that's still a sleeper, that really is impressive. There are very few vehicles that can genuinely do that, and France actually makes some of the most outstanding models in that regard. So can it actually convert that impressive spec into impressive performance? Because of course the fact that it's lightweight with a reasonably thumpy engine could make it useful. Well, it is front-wheel drive, which may be disappointing to some, but at the same time not at all surprising. And as I've mentioned before on the channel, front-wheel drive cars, although definitely not the best in all circumstances, do definitely have big advantages under the right circumstances. Small hatchbacks, small sports cars, those are the kind of vehicles which front-wheel drive really is in its element on. Now this proves that. 996 kilos would have been much more difficult a task were this a rear-wheel drive car, or definitely an all-wheel drive car. You'd be looking at probably another 50 to 100 kilos easily in game weight. That's after, of course, the full weight loss package. Now, the performance that it has is hindered in some ways by the front-wheel drive. Off the line, of course, it wheel spins a bit with 341 horsepower on tap, but The main advantage of front-wheel drive in the case of a car like this is control. You can throw this car with no thought about spinning out through most corners, and you can actually outpace some rear-wheel drive and definitely some all-wheel drive sports cars. Not necessarily high-end machines from, say, Aston Martin or Jaguar or Mercedes, but stuff like MR2s, VX220s, even Lotus Elises, that kind of thing. This car can be useful against those far, far more obvious choices of small sports car. You may not always beat them, but it will give them a surprisingly good run for their money, and under the right circumstances, especially for mass production, non-sporty vehicles, this actually offers a level of competitive ability which belies its look and its, let's say, social status. It's not exactly a go-to choice of sports vehicle, but that's perfect for what this car can do. It makes it an absolute sleeper within the sports car class. As we already said, there aren't many of those, and if you are looking for a really good small sports car that isn't rear-wheel drive, maybe out of necessity or you just fancy trying something different, then this is a great one to go for. It's got a great spec, great handling, and although the performance won't melt your face, it is more than quick enough for most tracks at its PP level. Not necessarily fully tuned at 499 pp, but certainly lower, say 475, definitely 450, and anything below that. It can be useful. For 26 grand, you can't really go wrong with a car like this. And although, as with many vehicles on the channel, I wouldn't recommend it as an essential purchase for everyone, for those who are into small sports car racing, sleeper cars, etc., it definitely delivers in that regard. But that's it overall for this particular pick. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.